Welcome back to Hannity, and we are in the Washington swamp where for years far-left bureaucrats burned through your hard-earned tax dollars on woke political causes, Green New Dealism, transgenderism,
condoms and Gaza.
even anti-American propaganda. Those days are now over. More of my interview with President Trump and Elon Musk. As I scroll this information, and I'll scroll a lot more than I'll mention to both of you, and this is the cost savings. I want people at home to understand this part. The average American makes $66,000 a year.
I don't.
Okay? We have $37 trillion in national debt.
Yes.
Now, all the money I'm about to mention and what we're going to scroll on our screen, and all of this is going to foreign countries. It is not being spent here in America for better schools, law and order.
I think the average tax-paying American should be mad as hell because their tax money is being poorly spent.
All right, let me go to the second question first. I want to know, because people like Joni Ernst and
Joni Ernst has tried for a long time, and she's actually got a lot of good data. Senator Ernst has been really helpful, actually.
Okay, but they
I just wanted to point out that we spent $70,000 for a DEI musical in Ireland. $47,000 for a transgender opera in Colombia. A comic book in Peru. How does this affect us in any way? And this is why people are mad. This is why everyone views USAID as a joke now. It's disgusting.
Joni Ernst has tried for a long time, and she's actually got a lot of good data. Senator Ernst has been really helpful, actually.
Okay, but they actually hide what the real purpose of the spending is.
Sure.
In other words, this is a question. How did you decipher? It will say humanitarian blah, blah, blah in Serbia.
$44.8 million for food and economic assistance for Venezuelan migrants in Colombia. Not U.S. citizens, Venezuelan migrants in Colombia. That's a fucking joke.
It will say humanitarian blah, blah, blah in Serbia or Afghanistan. We even give money to China, for crying out loud, which I think is nuts.
We'll give money to the Taliban.
But money to the Taliban?
Like a lot.
All right, so...
we trained them anyways.
I want to see the pictures of what they did.
But they try to obscure it, but then you got to the bottom line, which is what I'm now scrolling on the screen.
Yes.
And that is $20 million on a Sesame Street show in Iraq, $56 million to boost tourism in Tunisia and Egypt, $40 million to build schools in Jordan, $11 million to tell the Vietnamese to stop burning trash, $45 million for DEI scholarships in Burma, $520 million for consultant-driven ESG investments in Africa, DEI programs in Serbia. The president's favorite. I'm sure you love that taxpayer money was spent on a DEI musical in Ireland, or a transgender opera in Colombia, or a transgender comic book.
It sounds like how can these things be real? But this is actually what was done. It sounds like a comedy sketch.
I have 20 pages of this.
Right. It's a list a mile long.
If you had to put a number on it, how much do you think you've identified waste, fraud, abuse, corruption at this point? And again, we're going to be scrolling this throughout the program.
Well, the overall goal is to try to get $1 trillion out of the deficit. And if the deficit is not brought under control, America will go bankrupt. This is a very important thing for people to understand. A country is no different from an individual in that if an individual overspends, an individual can go bankrupt, and so can a country. And the massive waste, fraud, and abuse that has been going on, which is leading to a $2 trillion a year deficit. That's what the president was handed on Jan 20th, a $2 trillion deficit. It's insane.
For this fiscal year.
We inherit.
And it's like left or right, both. How can you support any of this? Because it's not American. It doesn't help us in any way. It's just pushing weird agendas out in the world. Like $66 million for an Iraq access to justice program. Like what is that? Rural households in sustainable manner in Colombia. What's the point of any of this?
Inherited
Yeah.
And inflation is back. I'm only here for 2.5 weeks.
That was January.
Inflation
You were there
is
for a
back.
week.
No, think of it. Inflation's back, and they said, "Oh, Trump." I had nothing to do with it. These people have run the country. They spent money like nobody's ever spent. They were given $9 trillion to throw out the window. $9 trillion. And they spent it on the Green New Scam, I call it. It's the greatest scam in the history of the country. One of them. We have a lot of them, I guess, but one of them. Dollar-wise,
and
probably.
DEI and wokeism and transgenderism.
Well, that's all part of it, yeah.
And LGBTQ+.
Yes.
By the way, not in America. Other countries, not here.
You know, the amazing thing is when you see, like, the teaching of DEI, $9 million. How do you spend $9 million to teach? No matter what it is, you could teach physics.
Totally.
You could go to MIT for a lot less.
Expensive.
Yeah,
Expensive.
the teaching of
Expensive,
DEI.
yes.
How much do you believe, Elon, you've identified in waste, fraud, abuse, corruption now, and how much do you anticipate you will?
Sure. Well, I think
1%. No, because it's so massive. This is huge money.
So what we found now is 1%.
We're just gotten
as
started.
Good as they are, they're not going to find some contract that was crooked, crooked as hell. And, I mean, there's going to be so much that isn't found. But what is found, I think he's going to find $1 trillion.
Yeah, I think so.
But I think it's
they're
a
pretty
very small
on track for
percentage
that at this point.
compared to what
they haven't even touched the
Let me go
Pentagon
to an
yet.
area
I think they
that
just
is
started on the
key.
IRS.
And you talked about this in recent interviews, and that is we don't need a Department of Education. Okay. And what some people are trying to do is stoke fears that, oh my gosh, my kid's not going to get the money for education, or grandma's Social Security and Medicare. This was a big promise of yours on the campaign trail. So I really want to give you both an opportunity to assure the American people you will keep, that money will be allocated for students, but with higher standards. For example, I would assume associated with monies given or
just
vouchers.
So much, and then Elon goes, but look, Social Security won't be touched, other than if there's fraud or something, we're going to find it's going to be strengthened, but won't be touched. Medicare, Medicaid, none of that stuff is going to be touched.
Nothing.
You don't have to. Now, if there are illegal migrants in the system, we're going to get them out of the system and all of that fraud, but it's not going to be touched. School. I want to bring school back to the states so that Iowa, Indiana, all these.
I don't know if that's a good idea, just because it doesn't really have like the same standard across the board. Like one state could be outperforming another, and it should all be standardized where we should all try to do the best at all times. But I don't really know how it's going to work after, they go through and give it back to the states. I don't know how any of that's going to work, but I feel like something's going to fall behind. So I don't really necessarily know if I agree with that yet.
Places, Idaho, New Hampshire. There's so many places, the states. I figure 35 really run well. And right now it's Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, China. China, can you imagine, has top schools. We're last, so they have a.
One thing I will say, one of the reasons I actually personally like Trump is because he's just trying things. He's trying to make a change. Nobody else has ever seemed to make a difference or tried anything big. They've all focused on the safe topics. It got old. It was not working. So I'm glad somebody's actually trying something.
A list of 40 countries. We're number 40. Usually we're 38, 39. The last time we were number 40. And what I say is you got to give it back. So it doesn't work. I'll tell you what we're number one in, cost per pupil. We spend more money than any other country by far. It's not even close per pupil. Okay. So we know it doesn't work. So we spend the most and we have the worst, right? The worst result. When we give that back to Indiana, when we give that back to Iowa and back to a lot of the states that run well, they run well. There's a lot of them, 35, 37, 38. Now you're going to have 10 laggards, but you're going to have 5 real laggards. But that's going to be okay. Take New York. You give it to Westchester County. You give it to Suffolk County. You give it to upstate New York. And you give it to Manhattan. But you give it to 4 or 5 subsections. Same thing in California. Los Angeles is going to be a problem, but you're going to give it to places that run well. We can change education. Now, School choice is important, but that will get taken care of automatically. We want to bring education back to the states. You will spend
So you're
half
leaning
the
more
number,
towards grants,
and I'm not even doing this.
vouchers, like
I'm not even.
parents?
I'm not even doing this to save, but you will. It costs you much less money. You get a much better education. If you go to some of these states, you'll be the equivalent of Norway, Sweden, Denmark, places that
Yeah, but I'm
really
worried about
have a
the other
good school
states.
system. You'll have those places will be the equivalent, and your overall numbers will get so much better.
Do you want standards associated?
The only
with
thing I
money?
want to do from Washington D.C. is make sure they're teaching English, reading, writing,
Math,
and
science.
arithmetic.
Science?
Okay, a little science.
Science might help.
You know,
Computers.
you're not going to have much of a problem with that, but that's it.
So your task now, and I pray to God this is successful. I really do. I wish you Godspeed. You know,
Yeah.
Godspeed, John Glenn.
It's going to be, by the way. I really believe.
But
it's
there
going
are,
to be.
but there
Because
are
the country's
legitimate
going to
areas.
do well beside this. This is cutting. We're only talking about cutting. We're also going to make a lot of money. We're taking in so much.
What about
money.
his business? What if there is
Then we won't
a
let him
contract
do it.
he would otherwise
We're
get?
not going to let him do it.
You're not
If
gonna let
he's
him do
got a conflict. I mean, look, he's in certain areas. I mean, I see this morning.
I don't know if this is like the biggest point of concern of people, or if it's just a talking point to like bash the whole system and DOGE in general. But I'm glad that Trump reassures that he won't be involved in anything that's a big conflict. But I don't know if that's going to be true or not. I mean, we'll have to see. But he's trying to take away the talking point. So
I didn't know, but I said do the right thing. Where they're cutting way back on the electric vehicle subsidies.
Yes.
They're cutting back.
You're losing.
Not only cutting back.
Hurt you.
Correct.
Yeah. Now,
You don't
I
care.
won't tell you.
Well,
He's probably not that happy with it, but that would have been one thing he would have come to me and said, listen, you got to do me a favor. This is crazy. But this was in the tax bill. They're cutting back on the subsidies. I wasn't involved in it. I said, do what's right, and they're coming up with a tax, but it's just preliminary. But I mean, if he were involved, wouldn't you think he'd probably do that? Now, maybe he does better if you cut back on the subsidies. Who knows? Because he figures he does think differently. He thinks he has a better product.
Yeah.
And as long as he has a level playing field, he doesn't care what you do, which
Exactly.
is very, he's told me that.
yeah. I mean, I haven't asked the president for anything ever.
And if
true.
it comes up, how will you handle it?
Well,
He won't be involved.
yeah, I'll recuse myself if it is.
If there's a
conflict.
conflict, he won't be involved.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't want that, and
I
he
hope
won't
that's
want
true.
it.
Right, and obviously I'm getting a sort of a daily proctology exam here. You know, it's not like I'll be getting away from something in the dead of night. you know?
Welcome to D.C. If you want a friend, get a dog.
Well, I do have a dog, but I also have friends.
You-
My dog loves me, poor little creature.
You know the truth with this
I need to
guy?
bring him to D.C.
I know every businessman. I know the good ones, the bad ones, the smart ones, the lucky ones. I know them. This guy's he's a brilliant guy. He's a great guy. He's got tremendous imagination and scientific imagination, far beyond, you keep talking about a technologist.
Trump
and all,
loves
but
glazing
you're much
Elon,
more
man.
than a technologist. You are that. But he's also a good person. He's a very good person, and he wants to see the country do well. And I know a lot of great business people, really great business people, but they're not really, in some cases, very good people. And I know people that would try and take advantage of the situation. This guy's somebody that really cares for the country, and I saw that very early on. I saw it really a long time ago when I got to know him. He's a very different kind of a character. That's why, who loves him? Young people that are very smart.
Well, there you have it. I hope that's true. I hope he does recuse himself, but it's like kind of the same system we have with pretty much everything else in government and like law enforcement. And see, if I knew an inmate that came into the prison because I was a correctional officer, I'd have to go to IA and we'd move the inmate. Eliminate like anything to where we could go kind of corrupt in a sense. And that's kind of what the whole government does as a whole, I think. So I hope that's true. I hope he keeps his he does do the whole recusing if something comes up that affects him. So overall, I think that's pretty good. I'm glad he's doing all these cuts and getting rid of all that useless shit that we're paying for that nobody ever agreed to, and it doesn't help Americans.